Technology, right?
All the
Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Chris Scaminaci, Vice President of Engineering here at TechPulse. Got my counterpart from across the pond, Robbie Emerson, CTO at Renada, joining me as well. We're here to take your questions, build live, and kind of talk about Halo and Q&A format. Live and vivo, we're here. So I think we got some people still joining. But we can kind of kick this off here. I think we should maybe just kind of start going down the list of questions, I guess, Robbie?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm just trying to pull up all the various chats as well, which is going to be an interesting one. But yeah,
okay. About 13 people joining us on YouTube, and another looks like 6 in Discord, and some more on Twitch and LinkedIn. So people are still trickling in, but we can kick it off here. So
yeah, that's fine.
Let's talk about what the topics of most interest were. First one was going to be automation and integration. The second was AI, ticketing, service delivery, reporting and analytics, asset management, and then invoice billing and contracts. So, man, I really don't want to talk about fucking billing, but here we are.
That can go at the bottom of the list. If we still have stuff to talk about at the end and we don't want to kill ourselves, then we might talk about billing.
I know, we always schedule 2 hours for stuff like this, and then we get 4 hours in and we're like, oh shit, okay, everybody, like, headsets are dying, we're done. Get over with. All right. All right, so the first question comes from Dion RTS. He says, how to set up an automation to create, for instance, a user from the self-service portal. Well, what do you think, Robbie? You got one for this, or you want
I can show one for this. Yeah.
Okay. You go first.
Let me work out how to share my screen. We're using new technology here. Bear with us. Share screen. Just doing something. We'll give it a second. There we go. Let's go with. Let's just show this tab. Open the audio. There we go. Cool. Let me know when you can see it. Hopefully everybody else can. There we go.
We're good.
Cool. So I think this falls into a couple of different parts, potentially 3 or 4 different parts, really depending on how in-depth you go with your new user creation, right? The first and foremost thing which people find really boring, but is actually the most important, is actually the front-facing form, right? It's the end user form that they're actually going to fill out when they want to submit a new starter. Now, some of that is going to be pretty straightforward. We need to know the user's first name. We need to know their last name. We need to know when they're starting. Some of it can be more complex. Some of it might be client specific, and some of it might be actually, we don't really care about the end user filling out. We want to collect that information or calculate that information ourselves, right? So we built a integration for this, and if I just show off the end user portal side, I'm going to have to do this in one window, that's fine. In the service catalog, we've got a user and services area, and we can start a new starter request. And in here is a bunch of fields, right? Now we've, again, mostly for demonstration purposes, shown all of the possible fields that you would want to collect, including things like display name and username, which often the end user isn't necessarily going to pick, right? They're just going to be picked for them based on what's available. Or display name is just going to be first name plus last name. But we can create we can start to set these values. We can use cool things like database lookups to populate these. You can even go as far with the username to, like, you could look up existing usernames. You can create a format based on what that client uses, right? First initial, last name, first name, not last name, all those kind of formats. Domains, we can build selection fields, which are specific to the client, right? Default domain here, obviously this is Renada. If I was to change the customer to this customer, no, it is this one. If I change customer over, that default domain is now a completely different set of domains, right? So we can write these SQL custom fields, which I'll go through a little bit about in a second, that can pull information from Halo, which is specific to specific customers. Things like what site the user is going to be based at. Again, these are pulling from the site of the customer. The departments, these are all the unique departments from all of the existing users inside of that customer inside of Halo. Who's going to be the user's line manager? Again, user inside of Halo. Who are we copying from? User inside of Halo. What licenses are going to be applied? Well, we can actually do a live check if we wanted to. This is looking at the licenses available inside of Halo, which should be synced with CSP on a daily basis, if not more often. And when we go to run the integration, we can actually go and check whether or not that license is available. But we can see the number available. We've then got whether they require hardware purchasing or not, which is irrelevant to our creation, right? But it's more information that we need to know. So yeah, we've got the front-facing form. That's first and foremost the most important thing, and the thing which you need to get right first. What you need to have is users submitting data in the right way. Otherwise, you can't automate it, right? Now, we can get really fancy these days with AI, and we can start to pull out information from emails that we're getting sent. The ideal is we get people in the portal and they just submit a form, right? The other alternative these days is we have link to user actions. So let me just submit that. So if they don't provide us all the information, well, we could actually go back to them and say, hey, thanks for submitting a new starter request, but we need you to fill out this form anyway, and just kick them straight back to the portal. So once they fill that out, that's going to come in to Halo for us to go and do. Right? We collect all this information, we're storing it in custom fields. We could even update that if for some reason they submitted something wrong, we could update that here. And in this instance, we're triggering an approval process to the customer. But for me, and the point here is that getting this bit right is quite difficult, especially when it comes to the SQL, if you're not used to it, but is really, really important to make sure that you can automate it, because we can't automate data that we don't have. So just going into very quickly, if I head off to, oh, it's going to not let me do that in a different tab. Here we go. So if I go to custom fields here, now a lot of people will know this already, but I just want to highlight it. If we look for example, actually that's better, copy access from. So copy groups from user. And we've got the option here of select the user to copy the access from, which is going to be a dynamic list of a SQL lookup. And then effectively here, if I can put this to a report so it's a little bit easier to see, we are querying the Halo database to ask for all the users and all the users' email addresses from the customer of the user that's submitting this form. Right, so we can again show dynamic data based on who's filling out the form to drive the right information getting into that form. Once we've done all of that, the next step is how do we automate it? And with this is going to be in Halo fashion, right? How many ways are there to skin a cat, right? I've probably worked with 20 different customers doing it 10 different ways. And if I'm honest, it comes down to what you're most comfortable with. I think that's right, Chris, right? A lot of automation. And there's another question a bit later of like, when do you decide to do a runbook versus something else? And I think a lot of it comes down to what you're comfortable with. There's no real right or wrong answer. Because Halo's so extensible, right? We can push this data or pull it from whichever service that we're going to build automations in. If you want to, you can go down the route of NAN or make.com if you hate yourself, or any of these kind of builders similar to Runbooks, right? Then they're not really any different. They're a workflow builder with steps that go one by one until you get to the end product. Or you could push it out into PowerShell and run it on a machine somewhere, or you can put it out to to Azure Runbooks and do it all in code. There really is no right or wrong answer. But we tend to, I'm pretty sure we broke this, so I apologize, but we tend to do things in Runbooks here at Renada, mostly because as Halo consultants, and only Halo consultants, Chris is lucky. He runs an MSP as well, so he gets to use real tools. I only get to play with Runbooks. So we do everything that we can in Runbooks, even things that we definitely shouldn't do in Runbooks. But the core of it, the integration is not that difficult. What we're doing is we're getting all the details from the customer. We're getting some additional site details for the address details that we need to put into the new user. We're then going to go and get the tenant ID of the customer, make sure they're not on-prem is basically what we're doing here. And then there's just one step, if you're using SIP, for example, to create that user. And it's just about providing all the information that you need to. This is just a simple post request to create a user inside of SIP. Again, you don't need to use SIP. There's other tools. You could go straight to the Graph API. We just sent it around SIP because it makes our lives easier. And once we create the user, we're going to spit back to, we're going to send out a password push and grab a secure URL, and then we're going to update the ticket and say, hey, we've created the user. Here's the login details, and then you can go and pass that on. Now, again, you could get as fancy as you want with this. I've got another customer where they didn't want to copy groups from users. They'd had problems with it before. So we get the users to submit the groups that they want access to, and then we loop through every single one and add the new user to them. We can procure licenses if you wanted to. We can apply licenses. All of that stuff is possible. But I would really start with the foundational level. Can we make a user? And once we can do that, let's expand on it.
Okay, now let me show from the flip side what it may look like if it's a non-totally native Halo solution. So let me see here. How to use technology. Here we go. All right, so much like what Robbie talked about, we start ours with a strong form. And a form is the #1 most important piece of onboarding automation, and you hit on it, is that you can control the data that you're gathering from the client at this first step, and that's going to drive all of your automation from there on, right? So getting a good form and making sure you get all the information you need is really critical. And it's the most important step of this whole process. So we basically force all of our clients to use the onboarding form in the portal. The nice thing, and one thing that I see is a very common mistake that people make, is they'll have a ticket type for like every client because they need different forms and fields. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah.
I've got a customer with 450 ticket types because of that.
Yeah. And like just now recently, we just onboarded a huge client that I had to make a second onboarding ticket type for, only because I'm using the fields in a different way and it just wasn't going to work the other way. So, but when you have a new starter request ticket type, you can have all the fields you want in here, use dynamic field visibility, scope those fields to the client so that they're only going to see the fields that actually matter. And making sure that you get all of the data you need in this form, again, is the most crucial step. Then you can do some crazy shit. So I usually use something like a universal onboarding workflow here, and this looks very messy. It's disgusting. And I know Connor is sitting there typing in the Discord as we speak, going, why are your lines like that? But it's very simple in the fact that the first thing I'm looking at is I'm evaluating which client it is, and then I'm going to basically break off into the same workflow steps per client, but it's only to expose different buttons. And the reason I need to expose different buttons for all the same actions is because it's different webhooks that are going to go out to Azure Automation to actually do the onboarding piece of it. But basically, we start with a license request, and that license inquiry is going to go out and look at the tenant using GDAP and an app registration. We're going to pull all the utilized licenses and display them in a pretty way. And we do that because we want to be able to scavenge licenses. And this is a thing that I implemented since NCE, because we want to not go buy a license on a 1-year commit if we don't need to. If there's a deactivated or a deleted user that has a license attached, we want to know that up front. so that we can go scavenge that license. But then we're gonna, do either a license request where the automation is going to go out and buy the license, or we're just going to create that user, and that user gets created by an onboarding webhook trigger, right? And this is just a webhook in Halo. You can use the Azure automation webhooks also. I have some stuff that's built in Azure automation webhooks just because they're runbooks in Azure, but I've been transitioning to using Azure automation function apps for everything lately. So I use just the straight webhooks for that. And the nice thing is you can shape the payload when you send a webhook out, right? So you can, all those custom fields that you're grabbing, you can shape those to be exactly what you want, send them out. And one thing that we do as part of this is give the agents the ability to check and make sure everything is correct while they're doing this before we, send the request out. So they basically get one last check to make sure that they're doing everything correct. And then when they do that, they basically just get an action that says, this is the information that's already been put into these fields by the client. So if anything's missing, here's your chance to fix it. Here's the, domain, the user type, what license type, if you need to adjust this. And we also give them the ability to mirror access, right? I know Robbie said something about them having problems copying groups and stuff. Mirroring access from an existing user only works if you have really, really tight constraints around how those groups work, and you're making sure that those groups are accurate. But, we'll say, mirror access from this other user at this client, and that'll go out as part of the webhook too. We'll look up that user. That all happens in Azure automation, right? Where we're actually going to look for, an existing user, make sure that there's not an existing user. If there is it actually the same name, or are we just using the same UPN? We're going to double check to make sure that if it is the same user, do they need to be reactivated? Because that's always a fringe scenario that comes up, right? Like either they're onboarding somebody with the same UPN because it's first initial last name, but Jay Smith already exists, or it's actually the same guy and he's been deactivated. We need to reactivate him. That's not necessarily an onboarding. That's a reactivation of the account. So there's a lot of those contingencies that you can have difficulty taking into consideration unless you use something like a runbook or something to do those kinds of automations. But our engineers will fire that off. It will go out. Everything is group based. So it's going to add them to a license group. It's going to add them to all their access groups, their groups that are going to skim them into SSO, all that stuff. And then it's going to return that data to the ticket, as well as email HR with a secure email. It says, hey, these are the starter credentials. We even set the tap to be a future starting tap for their start date based on what they put into the form for their start date. There's password push links, and this is all going to happen. It's basically a one-touch automation for stuff like this. But this has served me well. Now, there are some clients that you're not going to be able to get compliance in the portal with. That's a thing. It happens. For those, we have a parse request button. So we'll actually use AI in a runbook in Halo, and we'll send that request out, have it return it to us in a shaped JSON payload that we can deserialize back into those fields. Works good. So if you can't get portal compliance and you feel like the barrier to getting onboarding automations, in place is that your clients aren't going to use the portal, you have options. You can use AI to parse those things out. So
the other one's sending them that form back, right? The link to user action, which I'll try and demo in a bit more detail in a minute, but like the idea of, okay, you can send me an email, that's fine. I'm just going to send you the form back anyway, is, it's great, right? Because also they feel like they've gotten the right answer, because it's a lot quicker and easier for them to go, oh, okay, the ticket's already logged, I just need to fill out the details about this person, as opposed to, oh, I need to log into the portal, find the new starter button, blah, blah, blah. For you, it gets the same end goal. For them, for whatever reason, some people just won't ever go to your portal, but they'll click a link. Other people, just feel like they're benefiting by submitting the email first and then following up with the link. But yeah, there's those options as well.
Yeah, and so actually something that's come up a couple times recently, and it came up for me internally too, was how do you make this a two-step process? So for instance, I have a client where the HR department will put the new starter ticket in, but they don't actually have all of the information needed to onboard the user, like all the technical details, the hardware details, all that stuff. So what we ended up doing was firing an approval process. Okay, so this is actually disgusting. I'm going to show you this because I think actually
I know where you're going. And
yeah, I think actually you and I talked about it because I was like, Robbie, I found a bug, and yeah, I had you confirm it. But it's when we do this manager approval. So basically, one of the fields on the onboarding form is a custom field that's just a SQL lookup for all users of the site. Pick the manager for this user. And Halo added this, I mean, not crazy long ago, where it was like determine a user approver from a custom field. Yep. Yeah. So we use basically that custom field manager, and we send the approval to whoever HR, specifies as the manager for that new user. They fill out the rest of the form, right? All of the technical details, the hardware details. They submit it, then it comes to us to actually fire the automation. This didn't work until I think 2.184 when they fixed it, but now that it works, it's awesome. So definitely you have a lot of options here. It's very flexible.
I have a ITSM customer that has something like a 30-step onboarding process, and we have like probably, I think there's about 10 linked to user actions throughout the process, because they even do things which, it's quite cool in some respects, in that they're doing, so the new hire actually gets a link to user action for the person who's starting to confirm that they're actually happy to go ahead. They get their job offer and stuff, and all of that comes through to them. So you've got loads of flexibility there. Not just, approval process is a great way of doing this, but you've also got all those other options. But yeah.
And the common theme in Halo is that there's always more than one way to do something, right? Like there's always more than one way to skin a cat. And sometimes we sit down and as consultants and we're like, hey, how would you guys do this? And you get 6 different answers from 6 different consultants, and they're all correct and they all will work. And it's about like, what's the path of least resistance? What's the best user experience? What's, satisfies these technical requirements? So there's always more than one way. But
I've had before as well, people say to me like, oh, you did it this way, I did it a different way. Like, should I go and redo it all? I'm like, no. Does it work? Yes. Is it painfully complex? No. Leave it alone. Don't waste time redoing something generally that works absolutely fine. Obviously, there'll be certain examples where that's not the case, but in a lot of the time, if it works, great, move on. Automate the next thing. Come back to it when it breaks. There's a couple of questions in the chat. One of which was the first one actually was, what shouldn't an MSP do in Runbooks? Do you want to take this, or do you want me to take this as somebody who does everything in Runbooks?
My answer is nothing. Don't do anything in Runbooks. Runbooks are the devil. No. Okay, my answer is very simple, and then I'll let you take it. But because Robbie is by far like the world leader in Runbooks. Nobody does more complex Runbooks than Robbie. Point blank period. Nobody. My answer is, if it's a repeatable process that has 0 variation, 0 necessity for data manipulation, and will not interrupt your business if it breaks, that's a good candidate for a Runbook. And the reason I say that is because I have personally been burned on Runbooks no fewer than 3 times, 3 releases. So I always I'm gun shy on the Runbook thing now, but if it's something that makes sense, and I build a lot of Runbooks, but man, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, Robbie, I'll let you take that one.
Occasionally, I think we all know Halo as, run fast and break things. And most of the time, that's mostly fine, right? We accept the good with the bad, right? We accept that as a product, it advancing so much all the time is good for everybody, right? It's a great thing for everybody using the product. But occasionally, when it burns you, you get really, really annoyed about it. And that's acceptable. And that can be really, really frustrating. And especially with automation, which the idea is to reduce human error, reduce the problems that come from a human doing it. If the automation breaks, that's just as frustrating, if not more frustrating, right? Especially when you come to rely on it. My biggest thing for Runbooks, again, it depends on your preferences. We've had customers come to us before and say, oh, we're using an automation platform already. Should we move everything to Runbooks? No. What's the benefit? you've already got this platform. You're already invested in this platform. Continue using that platform. We've got a load of PowerShell scripts. We do everything via PowerShell. Should we move everything to Runbooks? No. Like, if that's how you're doing things today and it works for you, then just use Halo to push that data. You know, maybe you build a runbook to push the data in the right way that you want it or whatever, but keep your automation generally in one place if you can, because having it in 5 different places means 5 different potential services which can break. The other big one.
Let me add one thing there. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
That's a really important thing is that if you're doing a lot of your automation in PowerShell and stuff, and you're wondering, should I move it to Runbooks? No, but what you should do is remove your dependence on connecting to the Halo API and instead use a Runbook with a webhook to get stuff into Halo. Actually, my favorite thing about Runbooks is the ability to publicly webhook to Halo to return data. Basically, everything I build externally automation-wise, I use one Runbook that has like 2 parameters, like ticket ID, and this is my formatted HTML I want to dump back into the ticket. And I use that for everything. So, yeah.
The first time I did that, I didn't do it. A customer did it. A customer showed me, oh, I was doing something in Ninja and I wanted to get the data back into Halo. So I just made this Runbook with which triggers off a webhook. And I was just like, oh my God, that's incredibly smart. That is a really good example. In fact, let's just show that, right? That's what we're here to do. Let's just show that in its entirety, because that is such a simple Runbook to create. Let me pick front tab. And as you said, so powerful. So all we're going to do, we're going to head over to integrations, scroll all the way down to custom integrations and integration Runbooks. We're going to make a new one. We're going to call it webhook from external source. Scroll down and find Runbook start access and change this to can only be started from Halo and from a public endpoint. Now, for now, I'm going to use no authentication. We're not going to get into why authentication is good on your webhook endpoints. We're not going to get into the recent issue that we had with no lack of authentication on webhook endpoints. But depending on what you're doing, it's not in itself harmful. But yeah, as soon as we do that, we'll just hit save. We now get a URL which we'll delete after this call, but we've now got a URL which we can post to. Right. In our Runbook level variables, we can create 2 variables. We're going to create a first one, which is going to be a string, or we could make it an integer of webhook ticket ID. And that's literally going to be the request ticket ID. Now I'll try and post to this in a bit. And yeah, I can post to this in a bit and show what we're actually going to do. So what is this that I've just done? A Runbook level variable is mostly going to eventually, I think, replace output variables. I heard from Morgan they're more performant, so great. Effectively, they perform the same job as output variables. If you don't know what output variables are either, this is a way of us defining a variable. So in this case, our webhook ticket ID is going to be our variable. We define a data type. In this case, it's going to be an integer, right? Our ticket numbers are integers. And then down here, we define, well, where are we getting this from, right? Now, usually you would start with a request as opposed to creating this before we create the request. But usually we're trying to pull data out of a webhook that we've received. So the request is always the first bit. And this up arrow here lets us get into individual objects or properties inside the request. And then in this case, we're just passing through a ticket ID as one of our values. We wrap it in these brackets. Are they brackets? Greater than, less than signs, just because that's the convention that we use. And there is a bunch of complexity that you can add to this in terms of how you get those values and filtering things and everything like that. But for the moment, we've got a request ticket ID.
JSON.
I'm going to save it.
Learn JSON.
Yeah. That's probably that, and APIs, which we'll also go through in a minute, of just the very basics. And I know this is advanced, but even for a lot of people, they don't understand how easy it is to understand what Halo's doing by not reading documentation because it's boring and painful, and instead just doing the thing. So let's do note HTML, or let's do ticket update. We're going to store this as a string, right? Because this is some text that we're going to pass in. And this is going to come from our request note, right? I'm just defining this at the moment. You don't really need these exclamation marks anymore. You put them in later, but they are designed so that they take the quote marks off a string, so, or off a value. So if before I had this is a note, then it would remove these two, and then we can add them back in ourselves, or we can use it to combine two variables. There's all sorts of things that we can do with it. I still have, from the very early days of Runbooks, this habit of just slapping the exclamation mark everywhere. And then if I want to put quote marks in, I can do it myself. I've got control.
It also used to be how you could like ghetto cast across object types too, right? Like you could bring something in as a string and then just strip the quotes from it and make it an int.
Yeah, you just do what you want. And Halo's API is weirdly really flexible in what it will accept. So like integers, it will just accept you putting a string in there as long as it's a number. And so there's a lot of weirdness that shouldn't be allowed that it just kind of lets you get away with. So we've got our webhook ticket ID, and we've got a ticket update, which is going to be our string or our note that we're going to update. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to head over to HTTP, which is just Jesus, lost my mind. Will just allow me to post to this endpoint, right? And I can put this in here and then create an object. Inside there, we're going to have our ticket ID, which I'm going to go grab in a second. And we've got our note, which is going to be hello live stream. An HTTP client, that's what it's called. Right, let's grab that ticket ID that we had earlier, which is 1042. And let me share this. Cool. So I've chucked in that URL that we got earlier. I've added a body, which is going to be our ticket ID and a note. If I hit send, it's going to get accepted from Halo, but nothing's going to happen right now because we haven't defined anything, but we should still see it in our runbook. So if we go back to here.
And important to note, anything that starts a runbook in Halo is always going to contain a JSON object, whether it's started from inside of Halo or externally, right? At the source data is always going to be a JSON object. It's either just Halo starting its own runbook with that JSON object from whatever triggered it, or an external like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just got our request come in, which I posted from HTTP, and we've got our payload. We've got our ticket ID, which I specified, and our note. Great. That's all we really need. If we go back to our flowchart now, we've got, probably familiar to most people who've used workflows in Halo before, a very similar looking, very similar functioning workflow engine. All we're going to do, we're going to create a new step. I'm going to call it update ticket. Under the type, we're going to select action, and then the action type of Halo API action. Now, Halo has a bunch of built-in actions that you can do. That's new. Get ticket is new. Anyway, it's got a bunch of built-in actions. We used to have a hack for this, by the way. I don't know if you know this, Chris. I used to do a hack for this, which I actually, shout out to Morgan. I stole it from him. He created a runbook which starts with a update ticket, which just passes through the ticket ID. And then you can get output variables, runbook level variables from the response that you get from that. And by just sending the ticket ID, we can collect all that information. Anyway.
I did used to do that. And actually, when you were looking at the first screen, I was like, oh, a calc operation. This must be a beta instance. That looks new too.
It is new. Yeah, that's fairly new as well. And it's only basic arithmetic, but it'll all be fun, right? So here, we're now going to create an action inside of Halo, right? And at the base level, these are the things we need to provide. We actually don't need to provide whether it's hidden from the user, but it is a nice flag where we can define true so that we hide the update, especially if it's coming from an automation or something, right? We've
And
got
if you
our
don't
ticket
know,
ID.
hidden from user is the difference between a note and a private note action. If that hidden from user is true, that's what makes it a private note.
Yep, pretty much. So we've got our ticket ID, which we can, I'm going to have to save this before. Let me just save it and go back into it. A little annoyance with Runbooks, by the way. We created these two variables. If I go to the flowchart, the variables don't exist. Huh.
Save and refresh, save and refresh,
save
and refresh.
Refresh it. Click edit and go back. Oh, some new variables appeared. So we need to set our ticket ID. Well, we've got our ticket ID. That was our webhook ticket ID. We need to set a note, and that's just going to be our ticket update. So we can use the exclamation mark in there again to take away the quote marks if they were any. We can put an outcome of updated a ticket with my browse session. Oh, hung for a second. With a note, we can put anyone we like in the who, even an agent's name. It will not, if you start logging time against this and stuff, it's not going to log it to this agent. This is just a name, right? If you want to get clever with that, you actually can't do it in Halo API actions. They won't let you, but that's a whole different ballgame. For now, we're just updating a ticket, right? I hit save. Step 2 is success. And success, you can actually push updates to a ticket as well now based on success.
Oh, that's new.
Yeah, it's brand new. And failed. And we can do the same for failed, which is super, super useful, rather than having to, like, every time there's a failed step, have an additional step to update the ticket. So if I go and re-trigger my webhook, we've now got my delivery again, 10.42 and hello livestream. Now we've got an update on that ticket. So if we go, I'll do it in this tab. If we go over to my ticket, we have a new update from our automation with hello livestream. And now if somebody was crafty enough and had the URL already, they could be posting stuff in here as well, right? But we can add authentication to that. We're also very restricted in what we can actually do here, right? All we can actually achieve is adding a note to a ticket, which can't even be viewed by the end user. It can only be viewed by our agents. So we're restricted the impact of a potential breach of that URL or whatever. But yeah, it's like amazing. It's a really easy way if you're doing this inside of another product at the moment, right? You're writing PowerShell scripts, anything like that. All of these products have a way of posting to an endpoint. That's all you need to do. Then a one-step runbook to go and update the note.
Yep, and it's important. Okay, two things here. It's important to understand JSON at least at a basic level, because when you're setting up those runbook level variables or you're setting up output variables, what you're really doing is you're telling Halo how to deserialize the JSON object into variables. That's what it's doing. So the other thing is, like we're building things very, very quickly here just for demonstrative purposes, but you need to check the format of the data that you're getting before you start making API calls against it. Like in Robbie's example here, between the first step of the runbook should probably be like, check if there's data in these variables before I try to post them. Otherwise, you're going to get an error, and then you're going to get an email that there's going to be an error. So checking for the sanity of your data too is really important. And it's really cool that they're giving us the ability to do custom success and error messages. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, absolutely. And to highlight that point on the flip side, right? We just went through how we created an action on a ticket, right? How do we know what the fields were to provide? Well, starting with the fact that Halo now provides us with these Halo API actions, and those Halo API actions almost always have a initial demonstration of how to use that thing, right? So if you don't know how to create a ticket via the API, well, start here, click here. Okay, this is the stuff I need to provide. A ticket type ID. Okay, where do I go find that? And we can go find it, etc.
but we need to provide summary details, ticket type ID, and a priority. Now, we actually need to provide a user ID as well, but we won't worry about that right now. We've got the initial information that we might need. Same with update ticket. Now, I really wish they would change the name of update ticket and create action, because the number of people that get confused between update ticket, which is changing values on the ticket, not updating the ticket, right? What updating a ticket is adding an action or creating an action on that ticket, right? If you want to put something in that progress bar, in that progress tab, you need to be creating an action, not updating ticket. If you want to add custom fields or add custom field data, change statuses, a lot of that can be done here. But creating an action, putting notes in the ticket is done via create action.
And yeah, and this comes back to like, you need to understand the foundational concept of how tickets and actions kind of interact in Halo. A ticket is a container, and it has fields on it at the top level, and it contains a bunch of actions, and those actions are what you're doing when you're clicking buttons at the top of a workflow, right? And so when you're doing create action against the ticket in a runbook, you can either be doing just a custom action, but you can also be doing an action that exists in the actions config too, right? So if you specify an outcome ID or an outcome that already exists, you better satisfy the fields that outcome requires, or you're not going to be able to post your action. You're going to get a fail. So, oh my God, it's a million cursive windows.
That was impressive. There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to demonstrate that exact point, right? Of though I will show you something in a second, Chris, which I got added, which is actually really useful as well, in that you can bypass that restriction now. So if I click on a ticket, any ticket at all, what I can do is pop open from more tools here, and then developer tools. We can pop open the developer tools, and you'll normally get hit on this welcome page. And if we go over to the network tab, you'll see all sorts of stuff happening just while I sit on this ticket, right? It will ping for notifications or poll for notifications. Stuff will happen transiently. But if I click onto a ticket, you'll see there's a 1036 question mark here, which relates to my ticket ID. And if I click on it and click to the headers, we can see there's a GET request there. Okay, there's a GET request to my Halo instance /API/ticket/1036. And then there's some extra stuff to grab some additional information or do a database lookup, etc. But this is the crux of what we're doing. And we're doing a GET request to this endpoint, and the response is an absolute crap ton of data, because Halo has a lot of data in their tickets, right? We also have user data, client data, site data, all inside of this ticket. But that is, at the basic level, how you can start to understand how Halo works, how the API works without having to dig into the documentation. And then if I go and email a user on this ticket, the same thing will happen. And you'll see here, we have a post. If we go to the headers, we have a post to the actions endpoint with a payload in it, which has, if we pop this open, has a ticket ID of 1036, which matches my ticket ID, and a note somewhere, and a note HTML with some HTML p tags with test in it. Everything else here is not necessarily irrelevant, but at the crux of it, those are the things which I want to do, which is how we were doing it earlier. Now with email user, because it's a system action, we also had, like Chris said, we've got an outcome ID here of 53. Now, if I was to edit and resend this, which is also a really cool thing that you can do in Edge and super useful for testing this sort of thing. If I click edit and resend, it's going to pop open a box to go and do the same thing again, right? And I can chuck this into a JSON viewer very quickly to make this look a bit prettier so that we can all read it. And I can replay that ticket, that event that I just did. And if I refresh the ticket, we should get another outcome or another outcome happen on that ticket. I don't know why it didn't.
taking a Halo minute.
Yeah, Halo doesn't like me. Let's try just do this with a comment instead.
So the reason that he's able to do this, by the way, and that you're able to see the traffic, as it's being called to the API, is because Halo is not one program; it's actually two. So Halo is what's called WebAssembly, which means that it's compiling an application and running it in your browser. So when you're using the UI for Halo, it's actually running an application in your browser. That's the Halo front end. And all that front end does is make API calls against the back end and render the data, render the visuals and everything. So really the Halo front end is just a fancy API client for the back end. And because the back end API is not entirely documented, like if you've ever read the Halo API docs, it's like less than 1% of the actual endpoints are documented officially. If you look at the Swagger file, you'll see everything, but the Swagger file doesn't tell you how to use those endpoints, right?
Yep.
It just tells you this is an endpoint, this is the data shape that it accepts, but it doesn't tell you, what's required, not required, things like that. This is how you reverse engineer everything in Halo. If you need to know how to do something, go do it in the UI and look at the payload, and you can reverse engineer pretty much anything in Halo this way.
Yep, exactly. Is how I think everybody gets started with the Halo API because it's just so much easier to do this. So this time, there we go. We can see if I do it again, we get another update. And if I go and find wherever test is, let's say test 1, 2, 3, we get.
I like how you just demonstrated a replay attack in real time, by the way.
Yeah. But we can retest it, right? And I could go, okay, well, email subject is null. I probably don't need that for this to still work, right? Okay, let's delete it. Send. Did it work? I think so. Oh yeah, it worked. There's another one. And then you can just start stripping stuff out of this until you get down to the real nuts and bolts of the things that you need. I'm not sending an email. I don't need any of these email fields. Maybe. Does it work? Let's find out. Refresh it. Yeah, it works. Great. Keep going. Because Halo's going to send all of the variables, right? It's going to send everything in one go. When we want to send it, we don't need to send all this unnecessary information. So we can just send what we need to or what we want to send.
Absolutely. That was a really comprehensive view. And I think that actually it answered, I think, what the next question was, which was from Rodolph. It said, Runbooks seem to have a steep learning curve. The nodes and branches are not that intuitive. And I could use an entry guide with a couple of basic use cases. So I actually do have something I can show here. Let me see if I can do technology. Is it working? Yeah, it's working. Okay. Nodes and branches. So far we only did like a very basic thing so far, right? I've just received data from a webhook, posted to a ticket. What if you don't want to do that? What if you want to run a runbook as part of a workflow automatically or based on an event trigger? So a couple of foundational things to understand here. Halo is action driven. Everything in Halo is an action.
Yep.
And actions make things do other things in Halo. What's cool is that a lot of those actions have what are called event triggers associated with them. The same event triggers that you can use for things like automated tickets or for notifications can also trigger runbooks and webhooks and basically anything else that's event driven inside of the system, right? So you may have an event of new ticket logged and, maybe set a filter of ticket type equals alert, right? And why would you do something like this instead of have it be triggered manually? So I have a runbook that does AI parsing of alert emails because two things. I am a big advocate for if you're getting alerts from external systems like Ninja or things like that, don't send them to triage, don't make a dispatcher look at them, just load balance them at first line or whatever your main support team is. Second is if something is coming into triage, gets an emailed an alert, the time it takes to assign it to the right user, change it to an alert, do all that junk is wasted time. So a lot of what I'll do is use this alert runbook to extract the data from that ticket when it comes in, send it to OpenAI, where it'll actually evaluate that alert, right? Because in Runbooks, you can do not only Halo API actions, right? You can iterate through arrays. You can run a SQL query against the database. But what you can really what makes this the most powerful system ever implemented in a PSA ever, and I don't say that lightly, is that you can call external integration methods in these runbooks and based on conditional, situations, do different things. So in this case, I'm going to execute an integration method that calls OpenAI evaluate alert. And this is a method that I have come up with. It's just a very simple prompt, and it includes the ticket summary and the ticket details, right? Which again, there's those variables from the Halo API, and there's my little exclamation mark. I also, by the way, intuitively always add the exclamation mark even where it's not needed, because I'm super paranoid about formatting my JSON wrong.
Yep.
And when you call these external integration methods from inside of a runbook, you get output variable capability, right? So in my case, I'm calling the OpenAI API and I'm saying, okay, ChatGPT, give me back a JSON payload. It has to be a JSON payload. It has to be properly formatted, no backticks, no commentary, and assign each of these things to that JSON payload, right? So I want alert username, alert user email, company name, severity, and type. And I define how it, figures all those things out in the actual prompt, right? And I say return a clean JSON object in the format specified, no additional conversation, backticks, code blocks, or other characters. And I tell it in this prompt how to determine what those outputs are going to be. Then that response that comes in from the OpenAI API to Halo contains just a JSON object. We deserialize that by telling it response up, choice is 0, up, message, content, username. So I deserialize each of these little pieces into their own variables. And what we're looking at here is everything always starts as response. You think of response as the top level container of that JSON object. Then the up caret is giving you the next level down, right? So we're going to go response and then down one into the choices. Choices is an array. So it may have more than one response in there, but I'm going to take array index of 0 because in programming, 0 is always the first position of an array, not 1. Then I'm going to take the message and then the content and then the username. Well, Chris, how do I determine what my return JSON object looks like? Well, that's the great thing is that the first time you test this call, you're going to get the response and then you can look at what that JSON object looks like, because this is actually really well designed and it gives you like the logged response you can use to kind of iterate through and determine how this all works. So first thing I do is I call this OpenAI evaluate alert, and then you have your outcomes here. So 200 to 299. Actually, this is one thing I don't like, and I have been petitioning Morgan and Tim to change, is that I want a little bit more granularity around how the response codes are triggered, right? Because if you're getting like 206, 206 is a successful response, but no data. So like if it's a 206, I want to go to a fail step. I don't want to go to a success step. But,
yeah. Another one, just since you're talking AI, another one that we've seen recently a lot is with all the thinking models now, the traditional send response function of an API means that these APIs can take quite literally minutes to respond. And Halo currently has a 100-second timeout for any API calls. So we can't use any of the really clever models right now because we get timed out. But I've already talked to
what if I told you
that.
you could?
Oh, go on.
Okay, so this is a problem for not just AI models, but it does present there because yes, Halo's backend is .NET 8, and the .NET HTTP client has a timeout of 100 seconds for a request. I don't see them extending that because they're basically holding a socket open for a very long time. They probably don't want to waste CPU cycles on it. But what you can do, because I've had this problem with my automations as far as like function apps and stuff, because sometimes it does take a long time to iterate through data. It's going to be more than 100 seconds. I don't wait. What I do is I use an HTTP trigger just as a receiver, and then I drop it into a queue, and then the actual automation watches the queue. So I instantly respond to the Halo API, and then the worker process picks it up from the queue, runs the automation, and then I webhook it back in.
It's another example where you get to have fun because you get to use things other than runbooks. And I sit here just fuming basically because I have to use the tool that I have. But yeah, that's a great way of getting around it, right? Send it to something else to go and handle it, and then pull it back into Halo when we're ready. It's like set and forget one way, and then, oh, we've got an update, event-driven update inside of Halo to go and do the thing once we've got that information.
Exactly. And because only so much is ever going to fit in that 100-second window, right? And like sometimes that's actually one of the hard limits that I consider when I'm like, am I going to do something in a runbook, or am I going to do it as an external automation? Like, obviously my preference is going to be external automation in a lot of cases because I'm a software developer. But on the flip side of it, I want to keep things inside of the Halo platform as much as possible, especially when I'm building for other MSPs, because I don't want to have to support it if it breaks down the road, right? Like it should be something that's self-contained. And a lot of MSPs don't have the proficiencies to like maintain external automations and stuff. So I want to do stuff in Runbooks where I can. Sometimes it's just not possible. But so my runbook here, we're calling OpenAI. We're going to evaluate that alert, and then I'm sanity checking my data next, right? So you have condition steps, and condition steps in Halo are going to let you evaluate individual variables, the entire payload, things like that. So I could say, is my response not null? Is it unknown, right? Because I think part of my prompt says if this doesn't, if no client name is obvious or anything in this alert, just set it to unknown. And then I'm going to pivot my runbook further down the line and say, if it's not unknown or null, let's go ahead and like search the Halo API for that user. Otherwise, if it's not unknown or null and meets some other criteria, let's go down a different path. So first thing I'm doing is not unknown or null. If a username, so I'm checking both email and username in these two conditions to make sure that they're not null or unknown. If they are, I'm going to send them down and say, oh, is it actually the TechPulse client or something like that? Otherwise, I'm going to say, okay, we got to hit on either a username or email because you need one of those two to look a user up from the Halo API with the search function. Then my next downstream method is execute an integration method, Halo API for automation, get search user by email or name, right? Now, why is this an integration method? Because you can't search the Halo API and Halo API action. Now, I don't know. I think Morgan told me this is changing, right? We're going to be able to actually do that.
There was the get ticket, and obviously we've now got SQL. So we can kind of like native SQL as opposed to the abuse that we used to do. So having native SQL means we can do a whole host of things now, right?
Yeah, now that it actually works, because it didn't work up until recently. You could do the SQL query and not use the data downstream.
Yes, there was that as well. And it's kind of seen nowadays as a supported function as opposed to just Mendy found out you could just abuse the report API, and then we were like, yeah, everyone went gung-ho on it. And Halo were like, well, we're not sure we love this. And it was like, well, it's too late now, cat's out of the bag. So at least they fully support it now, which is great.
Right. And so, so you can now call the SQL, query the SQL thing, get a response and search that way. Most of my automations, actually, I basically will just set up a custom integration, and I have methods for all of these different things in the Halo API, right?
Yep.
So it's the Halo API calling the Halo API, and it's Halo APIception.
It's another thing which is a really good point, because we saw that list of Halo API actions earlier, right? And there was only a few, right? I was doing one today where I wanted to creating quotations. You just can't do that in a Halo API action. So you have to, and there's lots of reasons why you'd want to anyway, especially for things like searching, advanced searching, or even just with specific additional query parameters, create your own integration into your own HaloPSA instance, because that just allows you total freedom to get and pull and push whatever data you want, as opposed to being restricted to those Halo API actions.
Exactly. And the Halo, that's a good point, right? The Halo API actions don't let you set query params. So they're going to work in that same configuration. All you can change are the payloads, where if you're going to set up a custom integration and make your own methods, you have full control over the granularity. You can interact with the API any way you want from a runbook. So it's very powerful. I don't ever see the native Halo API stuff be as powerful as this, but the fact that you can do this is awesome. Like,
Yeah.
this basically unleashes Runbooks to interact with the Halo API any way you want it to.
Sure.
So my method here is search user by email or name, right? And this is my query param search. So this would add the question mark search equals, my alert user email. Then I have got my output variables again, right? Here's response up user 0, up ID, site ID, client name, site name. I'm going to get all that data out. If any of these things are null downstream, then we're going to fall back and use the unknown user, unknown client. But otherwise, if I've actually gotten a response and I've got an actual user, okay, let's go get the client ID by name, get the site ID, get the main contact. This is my fallback method. So if I've just found the client, but I can't find the user in the system, I'm just going to fall back and use general user at the main site.
Yep.
But if I have found the user, okay, let's update our ticket with that found information, right? And the reason, now site, not necessarily important here unless you're actually matching on a user, because you do have to specify the site if you're going to reassign that ticket to the correct site and user. You can't assign a ticket from the API to that user and not specify the site. Or I think you couldn't before. Maybe you can now, but at one point you couldn't do that. So that's why this specifies site ID.
There's no harm, right? We might as well give it all the information.
Right. Yeah. And I also give it this under force reassign. Okay. Why do you do that? Because if you have a schedule conflict or you have that thing on that prompts from the, hey, this person has a calendar and thing going on right now, force reassign true will skip that prompt in the API and just force it to assign to that agent.
Otherwise, another great point, right? Otherwise, the thing that you did in the UI will happen in the API in exactly the same way, and your API will just, or your Runbook will just get stuck, right? I can't do that thing because I got blocked by this prompt message. Just because you can't physically see the prompt message doesn't mean the prompt isn't happening, right? When you do, again, when I do it in the Halo UI, it's triggering an API call. The API is responding with a prompt to say, you need to press a button or you need to confirm this first. And then if you were to watch, probably how Chris found it originally, if you were to watch what happens when I hit OK to reassign it to them anyway. Oh, there's this extra flag that got added. Great, I'll steal that. I'll go use it.
Bingo. Yep. And yeah, it's not going to be explicitly obvious when you're getting an API response that says, this user has something going on right now. You're gonna be like, what does that even mean? And yeah, I had to correlate that to, oh, okay, that's the calendar pop-up that happens in the UI, because the UI picks up on those return messages to actually show those dialogues and stuff, and you kind of have to work around that in the API. But that was my demonstration of, here's an entry-level guide of a couple basic use cases. AI Alert Runbook is one. I think I could probably talk about this all day, but I'm gonna move on to the next one here. So the next one was from Colonel Zanders, and it was reporting seems to be our biggest challenge. Would love to use an external reports engine to create reports from data in HaloPSA. That's not a question, that's a statement. But I will say that there's a lot you can do here because Halo's API is so good. So one that I use Grafana for my dashboarding. Right, which at the end of the day is just doing it's just calling reports from the endpoints in Halo, right? Where I'm looking at my tickets open today. Wow, my team is killing it today. But you got things like this. You've got things like Power BI. That's another big one for external reporting and dashboarding. But I would say before you go to an external report engine, see what you can do in natively in Halo. And I know that I'm not going to steal the thunder from Connor and Robbie on that, but they are cooking us something up.
I'll show it. I'll show it.
Yes,
I'll show it.
Please. Yes.
We're so close. We just need to. it's the billing bit, right? You can't bill people wrong. We have to get this bit right. And yeah, we're still working.
And
that
I'm
through,
responsible for that delay because I shamed Connor
Yes.
into going to paddle, and
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
hating his life over it. I'm sorry,
Yeah, I
Connor.
think while
Please
he's
forgive me.
happy with the decision, he's just hating his life in the migration. But yeah, we're currently working very, very close to a product which we're calling Elegant Insights, which is effectively an AI chat for writing reports inside of Halo. So I'm just going to take a really
It's so
easy
good.
example.
I use this every day, and it's so good.
So again, we've all used chatbots at this point, right? We can prompt it with a basic query, and it will respond with some SQL. We've spent a lot of time writing our own database schema, adding a bunch of additional information, preloading the prompt with, I think it's about 1,000 lines at this point of additional context data, which means, like Chris said very kindly, it is pretty good. We're pretty happy with the performance. We use it on a daily basis because we hate writing reports. Everybody hates writing reports because the SQL schema is a nightmare to work with. But yeah, we can take this without, I'll just go into the new tab.
By the way, you guys can't see it, but Quentin just said in the consultants chat, so how does he have elegant insights that we don't?
Yeah,
be
not
mad,
sure.
Quentin.
We can work that out. Yeah, and here we go. Right, there's a basic open ticket report, and we can prompt it for additional information. I also, obviously, again, it's a chatbot. We can start adding additional queries. I also recently built a little version for custom fields, so hopefully this works. This is much more work in progress, but can you write me custom field to return all users within the customer of the ticket? I might have to prompt it to give it the user ID variable, but we'll see. We'll see what it does.
I've been using this actually with great success for the most part. The only thing that stumped it was the other day when I messaged you. I'm like, Robbie, put me on the right track because I can't figure out this fucking custom field lookup. But
so here, this is provided one which would work fine. It just wouldn't work on your new ticket screen because we're using $fault ID in here. Now, obviously, in this case, we're creating a new ticket, right? We don't have a ticket ID. But if we use this instead, here we go. Grab that. I'm going to again just head back to my sandbox instance. I'm just going to pick a user ID to do this from. So this user ID is 142, and head over to reporting. Actually, I'm going to show that in a second because it's another thing which even people who've been using Halo for a while don't realize. And there we go. The functioning SQL custom field. If you don't know already, SQL custom fields, they always have to return an ID and a display. So that's what these two values are. And then there we go. So the thing that I was about to talk about before I got distracted was we've also got, if I could find where the live stream was there it is. Another thing which people don't realize instantly inside of Halo is, there we go, is that the right one? Is looking at your URL bar and gleaning information from it, right? I sort of glossed over a really easy but also really useful example here. I wanted to find a random user ID, right? Now, I could do that by going to reporting, creating a report, going to a data source, creating a new custom SQL query and doing select star from users. And then go, okay, well, we have a user ID. If I could go find it, I have a user ID of 19 here, and then I could use that. A much easier way is go to customers, go to users, find a user, use the lovely Tim Bowers, and up in the URL bar there is user ID equals 46. So I can just grab that user ID. I could go back to my reporting here, right? And I could.
And when we said query params earlier, when we were talking about, that's a query parameter in the URL bar.
And now I can write SQL providing that user ID. And if I hit preview report, now I've got that user ID being returned to me. So if I wanted to find out everything about Tim Bowers, or if I wanted to find out where in the SQL is Tim's email kept, which I think is public. I hope. Yeah, he puts on LinkedIn or on Reddit all the time. I'm not going to worry too much. If I want to find out things about these users, I can do select star from users where UID equals, I'll just use 1 for now. Or 18, I think it was the one I had earlier. 25.
Oh, no.
There we go. If I want to find information about this user, I can go to the UI, find a user ID, come into here, and then I can just scroll through all of this massive wad of data. Or if I'm looking for something specific, like the email address, I can type in what I know it to be, right? So just going back, if I go back to my customers, my users, and find that user ID. Again, another way of like getting through the system really quickly is if I know, again, what user ID I'm looking for. I didn't go and find user ID 25, which happens to be the second one in the list, but I didn't go find it. I clicked the first one, edited the user ID here, and typed 25. Right, that's just a much quicker way of getting to the right thing rather than having to search or whatever.
I do that
Now,
with
if I
tickets.
go,
I just put the I just do /tickets question ID equals this instead of going to search, because I feel like clicking 19 buttons to search takes too much time.
absolutely. So if I want to go find out what is this additional info field in the SQL, right? I put additional info, save it on the user, go back to my SQL report, which is here, refresh it, and type and search for additional info. Oh, okay, it's other 5. Right, so now I can start to map those two things between the API, the UI, and the SQL of where all this data is. Another really nice one on the SQL side, if I create a new report, go to data source and select use query builder. Don't use the AI query builder. I know we're making an AI query builder product, which is why I might say that. However, it just sucks.
Yeah, I don't use the
go to use query builder, and we've got a bunch of these options where, again, I can just pick information out without having to know any SQL. If I use query builder, in this case, we're going to pick tickets, hit next. It now has fields and conditions. So if I go ticket ID, summary, details, let's just add those 3 for now. Hit save, go to preview and hit load. We're going to get those 3 columns, right? Fairly straightforward. But if I go back to data source now and change use query builder to write a custom SQL query, oh, there's all the SQL that the query builder created in order to get that same data. So now I can work out, okay, symptom 2, which you probably wouldn't guess, right, is the details field on a ticket. And there's all sorts of horribly named SQL fields that are something completely different in the API, something completely different in the UI, but you can find by kind of reverse engineering in the same way. So a lot of this, like 90% of what we do as consultants, is just reverse engineer Halo in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, eventually you hit like this period of enlightenment where you're like thinking as how the Halo developers might think, and like once you can step into their mindset, you can actually like determine how it all works. And like really, it's a thing. Like you just hit this light bulb moment, and you're like, you know, I've never seen this before. It's a brand new feature, but I bet you it works this way because you live in their mindset now. But yeah, like the query builder, that's great. It's the only downside of query builder is it's not available for most of the tables. It is for like the important ones like tickets and actions where you're going to use it the majority of the time. But yeah, even I do that all the time. You know, like there's also another way to do this is I'll share here. There is a report in the repository.
Oh yeah.
Called all
so
columns
useful.
and tables. So useful. I use this every day. Even when I'm using Elegant Insights, I'm using this, and I'll filter down by the table that I know that data exists in, because sometimes you're not going to know, and it's not going to make sense which field it is, right? And I'm going to go like table name includes faults, and I just want to look at what all of the columns are in faults, right? And usually from here, faults is a bad example. It's got like
but you can
800
search
different fields,
right? You can go table name, and then I can just start typing, what do I think this table is called? Or even, what do I think this column is called? I don't know what table it's in, right? I use that all the time with like just typing fault or fault ID
into the column name and then trying to match up. Oh, okay, so tickets links to quotes on QH fault ID. That makes sense. Now I know, off I go, I can carry on my reports or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
The only place this all like falls apart is when you get to the control tables, because nothing makes sense in the control tables. There's no logic or like theory to it at all.
Yeah, I actually have insight into that control table in even more detail, and it made even less sense once I had that insight. So
there's things like that in Halo where like the more context you learn about why it is the way it is, it actually makes less sense. I don't know.
Yeah, most of the time you're like, oh no, I can understand why they did that, because once you consider all these other 100 additional context things which exist, okay, you can kind of understand why they did that. Naming details symptom 2 makes no sense whatsoever. And it was probably, tell you can blame, probably Paul Hamilton from about 15 years ago is the reason that exists, even 20 years ago. But yeah, it's just
like what really is like sends me over is like I'm doing a huge ITSM build right now, and like the things that are named something on the PSA side are named entirely different things on the ITSM side, but for no reason. Like,
I don't get it. I even hate the same thing. PSA, the US and the UK language pack. Like, why is one agreements, one contracts? So now, depending on who I'm speaking to, they're different things when they're the same thing. Like, why do I have to say agreements / contracts? Or it's just
it
why?
Makes no sense.
Start with the name, stick with it.
Yeah, like please also stop calling it agreements in any language pack, because it confuses all of the ConnectWise people. Please stop. Like,
products, items, they're the same
products,
thing.
items.
And even if you're in the language pack that has it called products, in certain places it'll be called items anyway. So like, just stick with one.
Consistently inconsistent. It's always
that is the one consistent thing with Halo.
Okay, what's the next one here? Can we base an action? This is from TCW GAV. Can we base an action on an if-then type of statement using a custom field? For example, I have a custom field with a yes/no value. If the client user answers with a yes, and then I want to auto spawn a child ticket and move to the next step in the workflow. If the client user answers no, then move to the next step in the workflow.
Can we take this one?
Yeah.
So the answer is no, but also sort of yes.
As with so many things,
I'm not going to elaborate anymore. So the direct answer is no, you can't control whether actions are available to an agent based on custom field values, right? The restrictions that we have for actions purely come inside our workflows, where within any workflow, I can define that this action is restricted, but those restrictions are all, there's now groups, I'm not even going to get into that. These restrictions are all based on the agent or the team, right? They're just simply the agent has a role, they don't have a role, they're the end user, they're not the end user, whatever. This doesn't define anything about custom fields. However, if I have a workflow, I could say, I could have 2 different steps, and we can have a start step. And let's make this my start step. And based on that custom field value, this could be when the ticket's submitted. It could be actually 4 or 5 steps down the workflow, right? We've got this step here, which can take a forking action depending on the value of the custom field, right? So in here, I could say, I want to do an automation. These are actually super powerful automations that people sleep on, I think, is quick actions. You can create an action in the system that does nothing, right? We often call it just skip step, but it does effectively nothing. It can be hidden from both your end users and also from the conversation view. So your agents won't even see it unless they really go digging for it. So it's effectively a hidden action. And we can call this action automatically based on some conditions. So the trigger here can be usually when meeting the conditions through entering the step or updating the ticket, So the key thing to understand is the ticket stays at this step, but gets updated, it will run this automation again and again and again, right? So you always want to move on from the step that you're in if you're running an automation on it, or typically you would, because you don't want it to just run over and over and over again. But we can have a trigger here and say, okay, if the accounting software is equal to Sage, then we move the ticket to a new step called the bin, and we get rid of that customer, right? That's done, dusted. We don't ever have to deal with Sage. However, if that same custom field was, we do the same step, exactly the same way, if that custom field now is equal to QuickBooks Online, we would also put QuickBooks Desktop in the bin, by the way. Both of those go in the same place. Now we can move on to actually doing some work, right? And we can move this to a new step, maybe work with this customer, right? So we can define those automations that happen just based on fields or values that exist in custom fields. And the example you gave was, what about spawning a child ticket, right? Now, you could do this in this way, and you could have another action, which is an automation that creates a child ticket, blah, blah, blah. However, there's actually also another easier way, and another
Templates.
Yeah, another set of automations that you can do, just in the form of creating templates. So
Ticket templates are one of the biggest things that people sleep on also.
yeah,
Insanely powerful. Insanely.
yeah. So I've just made this new one, we'll call it test. And this template can have a bunch of values itself. So we can define the ticket type that this is linked to, which can set the ticket type if the ticket isn't that type and you apply the template, or can be used to apply the template automatically if the ticket is already that type. Or we can ignore it entirely, but we can also set default summaries on these tickets. We can set the status. We can do all of these same things that we could do at the ticket type level with a template as well. We can also create to-do list items. So we can add checklist of jobs that we need to do for this ticket based on it being a certain type of task. But the one that you mentioned is that ability to create child tickets. So if I click into children, click add, and find this random child template, I can say now, whenever this ticket gets created, make this child ticket, right? So we'll have effectively project management is the classic example, a project ticket and a project task. And I could have 100 project tasks in here. I could have 1 project task in here. But if I edit it, you'll see they've got number of rules and it says 0. Now, this is probably one of Halo's most confusing UIs.
Oh, yeah.
Group number -1 versus creating groups, and usually you'll only have 1 condition, but you can have like multiple conditions to define whether it gets created, blah, blah, blah. However, for now, we'll just say this. We've got a bunch of conditions here, right? When another child ticket gets closed, create this one. After 5 days, create this one. After a particular action in the system has been done, right? That won't have custom field restrictions, but whenever that action is done, or like you were saying before, when a custom field of these types has a certain value. So if a single select field, accounting software is equal to QuickBooks Online, then create this child ticket, right? So yeah, that would be the easiest way to do it. And you can even apply a template talking about quick actions in a new action. I can, pretty sure, I might just be lying here.
I think it's on defaults, isn't it?
It might be. Can you actually do this? No.
I thought you could do it too. Oh no, it's happening. We're being gaslit.
No, you can't.
I could have sworn.
But you can apply a template via
a rule.
a ticket rule, which you could run via the workflow. So just to show, we've got a ticket rule here. Apply test template.
Can you do it with a workflow step rule? I think that's
Probably yeah, you would be able to do that as well. Yeah, so we could say on new tickets or on existing tickets or new and existing tickets, or even
a genuine really like this option is a manual ticket rule, which sounds a bit nuts, but it allows you to like bulk close tickets based on criteria and all sorts of cool little things. But yeah, with a new ticket or an existing ticket, we could again say that that custom field has to have a certain value, then apply a template, and that can apply our test template here, as well as recently set ticket color. But yeah, you can use ticket rules for that. Another source of automation in Halo. I think we're up to like 5 or 6 now. We're not at the end anywhere near.
Not even close. Yeah. And I'll add that there's another really good use case for templates that people probably, it doesn't occur to them off the top of their head, but your new starter tickets, like we were talking about in the beginning, those usually have multiple things happening, right? So, a best practice would be that if you have multiple things that need to be done on a ticket and they need to be done by different disjoint departments or teams, you want to split that ticket into multiple parent-child relationship tickets and then parallel process those tasks. So an example would be when our new starters come in, certain clients get like a new starter appointment. That spawns off a child ticket. That goes to the dispatchers to actually schedule that for an engineer, and then they'll assign it. You may have the actual onboarding ticket itself is going to be, set to somebody else, a specific kind of team, and your quote and order hardware is going to go to a sales team as a child ticket. These kinds of things are extremely powerful, especially because you can say, I want to create this when a checkbox field has been checked. This user requires hardware. You're going to get a child ticket only if the person filling out the form says, yeah, this user requires hardware. So it's not even just the individual things like templates or, workflow automations or any of this stuff that are individually super powerful. They are, but it's the different configurations of combining them that makes really like anything possible. You've got 10, 15 different ways to automate things. And like when we were talking about earlier, where we said there's always more than one way to skin a cat in Halo, it's because you can combine these different methods and really always get to the end goal, right? And I want to highlight one other thing here is that this to-do list, we kind of just glossed over it, but you can client scope these items on these to-do lists. The same way that we were talking earlier about on new starter tickets, you can have those custom fields be client scoped or use dynamic field visibility. You can do the same thing and have, one generalized template for all your client onboarding tickets and scope the individual to-do list items to a client. That's huge. This is, I always say this is relatively new because like I have time is a flat circle for me. So like when this was, I want to say like within the last year and a half or so, but it didn't always used to be this way. And so something that I run into a lot.
Groups recently. So you can have whole groups that are client specific, which is awesome as well.
Yeah. And man, I would really wish field groups could be client specific, but we're getting there. Something I run into a lot is people that onboarded to Halo 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe even more recently than that, and it wasn't capable of doing what they wanted to do at that time, but they never revisit and go back and probably a lot of that functionality that you're looking for exists now in the system. You wouldn't even recognize the product from 4 or 5 years ago. We have come so far, and it's easy for us to kind of give them shit and poke at them and say, hey, guys, where's the documentation or this or that, or hey, look, this list of bugs this week. But at the end of the day, we've come a long way. We've come a long way.
And they're not stopping. I saw 196 got released today. That's got a whole shitload more releases in it. So like, it's not going anywhere. It's not changing. We're still just getting more and more. So that's a really good point about like the product changing. The same way individual features completely change from when they're released. Like even the most recent example I can give is distribution lists and mail campaigns. They came out and genuinely were almost completely unusable by anyone. They were in the product. And Connor and I look at it and go, why is this in the product? Why does it exist? Right? At all. Because it doesn't fit. It maybe fits 1% of people's needs. But then within
3 months, they'd added dynamic distribution lists, which was amazing. They've added nurture campaigns and other changes to mail campaigns that actually make them super useful. They've added a MailChimp integration, so you can actually do the campaign itself through MailChimp. Like,
I use that. It's awesome. Yeah.
Going and looking at a feature and being like, oh, this doesn't do the thing I want it to do, like that, you will definitely find that, but go back to it 6 months later, or go check the release notes 6 months later and see, has anything changed with this? Oh, a whole host of things has changed. Maybe I'll go revisit it.
Or like, if it still doesn't do what you want, email them, because if you make a compelling case, your request will be put in the product.
Yep, we do it every day.
Do it all the time. All the time.
It's a thing. They're very receptive to change, and if your changes are smart, right, then they'll do it. We get them all the time. Customers will go, oh, wouldn't it be cool if it did this? And it's like, oh, that's so simple and obvious. And 2 hours later, Tim's devved it in, and it's like, oh, it's in a build in a couple of weeks. Amazing.
I love that. I love that. Like, hey, Tim Morgan, this thing is not doing the thing. Can you make it do the thing? And like 3 hours later, hey, Chris, it now does the thing. Thanks. You know, like, I'm glad you brought up mail campaigns, because mail campaigns were a true catastrophe when they launched. And I was using the MailChimp integration for them when they came out. And so I was like less affected than everybody else, but I was actually setting it up for somebody in implementation like a couple months, not even a couple months ago, maybe like a month ago. And they were asking me about nurture campaigns, because I guess that's something that ConnectWise can do. And I'm like, well, I don't think that you can do nurture campaigns. And I start clicking in and I'm like, oh shit, they put nurture campaigns in here. You could do it. And it's actually good. Like, it's
cool.
Yeah, like the one thing I will say is, if you're going to do mail campaigns from Halo, like, hook up a separate SMTP box to send those from. Don't send them from your support email, or you will have a bad day.
Yes.
So
100%. And similarly, don't use the inbuilt HTML email builder. Just get AI to write it, frankly. Get AI to write your email template and then just import it, and you'll have a good time. The inbuilt builder is just not great, to be honest.
And it's not Halo's fault that it's not great. They use a third-party tool that's bolted in for it. Like, don't use the HTML designer anywhere. It is bad. It just adds a bunch of junk to your templates. I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a couple of important things with templates that people ask about all the time. And like, how do I make my templates work everywhere?
Yes. One, you won't.
One, you won't.
There will always be something that doesn't look quite right in one product. You just have to eventually get over it. But certainly in terms of making them look good enough everywhere.
Inline styles, that's number one. Never use a style block. Style blocks get stripped out of Outlook Desktop and some other clients. So inline styles will usually help you. And what I mean by inline styles is like your styles are actually declared inline in the HTML, not at a style block at the top. Now I'm breaking my own rule here. You can see I've got a style block here, but my style block actually contains a media only screen for email container width. This is respected by clients. So this is like the only thing, right? Everything else should be inline styles, but ChatGPT, Claude, they're really good at writing HTML. So do your email templates with AI. This is actually like one of the best things you could use AI for, as far as getting this done, because there's also 84 of these now or something. Yeah, 84. So you don't use all of them, obviously, but it's enough that it's a daunting task. I usually tell people, like, make one branded template and then fill in the center of it with whatever needs to be filled in. The other thing is, if you're going to embed external images, either they need to be hosted in Halo, or I have a lot better luck doing like base 64 encoded images inside the document, inside the actual template. Like,
getting them into Outlook Desktop specifically can be really painful if you're not doing base 64 encoded.
A lot of email clients do not like externally hosted images. They can be a security risk. But if you base 64 encode your image, you're gonna get a lot of text like this, right? And it's gonna be like hard to look at, but it's also gonna clear every email client flawlessly without a problem. The third thing I would mention there is that what you see here is not what you get.
Yes.
So
yes.
this is not an accurate representation of what your template is going to look like when it renders. So,
In any of the browsers, frankly.
right. Yeah. Absolutely not. Okay, so what's the next one we got here? So from Bacon Up, we got favorite applications of AI and whether it's making your processes more optimized or if it's been a headache to set up and manage. Ooh, man, that's a loaded question. I'm gonna add a little bit of flavor here, and then I guess I'll let Robbie kind of go to town on this. But I could talk about this for an hour. But a lot of the AI stuff in Halo is well intentioned, but kind of junk. And it's not. You can't blame Halo for it because it's not their fault. The way that you look at 100 different Halo instances, they're all going to be configured 100 different ways, and everybody's going to have 100 different processes. And it's so hard to design an AI product that can account for all of that stuff. Trust me, I'm doing it. I know. But there are some like actually super useful pieces of this that I do recommend that everybody uses. One would be like the improve agent note. Huge, massive, use it. If your prompt is good, there's no downside. It's super cheap to run. It works great.
And you can make it toggleable. They don't have to do it, but they can have a button they can click that does it. Great.
Yep. Yeah. So actually, recently it was not working when you did have it set automatically to do it, and I hope they fixed that. I haven't checked if they fixed it yet, but it was broken for a while if you had it set to do it automatically. The other one I think would be like search. Hooking up Azure AI search can be super beneficial. The threshold that it uses out of the box of like 85% match is like far too high for a vector similarity search. If you set this somewhere down around like 35, 40, you're going to be pretty okay. And it's still not the greatest vector search in the world, but it is better than nothing. I've never used the AI knowledge search. Don't know if it works. I'm pretty sure knowledge creation doesn't work, right?
It works. It's just a runbook. I don't think Halo's one works. We built one that worked, but I mean, it's. I think that you were touching on it as well as not only is everybody's Halo instances built differently, but the data is different in the sense of some people write great, and very few actual good engineers do this, but some people write really, really good notes in their tickets, and some people, like me, write fixed it and close it. Right?
Yeah.
You can't create a knowledge base article off fixed it, can you? So it's the age-old thing of AO is only as good as the data that you're giving it. And if you're giving it crap data because you're more interested in closing the ticket and moving on to the next thing than you are writing a big explanation about how you fixed it, then it's not going to be very good. And that goes for not only the AO knowledge based, not only the surveys, but the vectors as well, right? The vectors aren't going to be any good if there's 3 lines of text in the entire ticket, which is the issue, and fixed it. But yeah.
Yeah, and that vector search thing too. I think when it was initially implemented, and for the majority of its life cycle, it was only indexing the summary and symptom 2, the details of the ticket. It was not actually vectorizing the rest of the actions. I think that's different now.
I think so as well, yeah. I think they take it every action, but
or it's a clearance, I think, something like that.
But they do something.
Yeah, they're actually vectorizing the actions now, but that's a good thing and a bad thing because, like Robbie said, if your note is fixed it, you're going to get a vector match against fixed it for any ticket that says fixed it, and it's going to actually junk up the data. So this is something that we're doing at Quantum Ops, and it is actually insanely complicated. People have no concept of how complicated vector search is just by itself, but doing it in action level in a ticketing system is so complicated. So like, I don't hold it against Halo at all. It is a very, very difficult thing to do, and to do it well and to do it cost effectively is really, really tough. The AI thank you detection, don't use it. Turn it off. Don't ever check this box. If you check this box, you're gonna have a bad time. Yep.
Connor said it to me the other day. He said, I asked the customer the other day, they asked me about using thank you detection. They thought it was a really good idea. And he said, what's your tolerance for it not doing it correctly? And they said once. He said, then don't turn it on.
Yeah, don't turn it on.
Which is the answer for most people, right? If it goes wrong once, I'm not going to use it. Okay, then we definitely shouldn't use it because it will go wrong because it's AI.
Yeah, exactly. What that does is it feeds the action into AI and it says, does this say thank you? And like, I think they have the temperature set at 0.7 or something. So sometimes it will say, yeah, it says thank you, but it in no way says thank you. There's variability in it, and it's not, if it's not consistent, you can't use it. There has also been numerous bugs around AI thank you detection that have caused like aberrant behavior elsewhere in the system. So I think there was like one where AI thank you detection was actually like preventing tickets from getting created from a mailbox or something at one point, because it thought it was like an AI reply to a thank you or something. And yeah,
the thing I'd love to see with that, which would solve it for me, is if you turn AI thank you detection on, it still sends the agent a notification to say AI thank you detection detected. And then me as an agent, I can click the notification, see, yeah, it says thank you, and Control W, close off the ticket, move on to the next one. But that additional oversight of 1 second check would be so useful comparatively to, I don't know, that the technician doesn't know, and the user doesn't know that their ticket hasn't been reopened.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's exactly the biggest problem with AI thank you detection is that they're not writing the action into the ticket if it detects it as a thank you, right? Like it just goes to the void.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, if they wrote the action back and then you could run a report and like see all the ones that it didn't reopen, that would be auditable and be easy to, fine tune, or let us fine tune the prompt for it. But that would be great too.
A good example where I think the power with AI in Halo is understanding a lot of this automation stuff that we talked about earlier, the novel use cases that you have within your own MSP, right? Now, there's some more generic examples, like your one earlier, Chris, of like, actually, we're going to ingest an alert or even just a ticket, and we're going to have our own really good prompt to go and ask a bunch of questions that we want to answer and write them somewhere. Amazing use case. But if you're doing that via a runbook or some other custom method where you've got full control over it, that to me has so much more power than flicking some switches in the AI config, right?
Right.
Because you're either not going to understand them, or you're not really going to understand what the benefits of them are, or more importantly, the negatives of them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you're kind of at the mercy of whatever prompt is underlying this and then running this mechanism, and like it's not ideal. Writing your own custom integration methods against the AI APIs like really unleashes your Halo instance in a lot of ways. So one thing actually I'll bring up with AI that is actually like game changing that I don't think a lot of people are not doing is, up until very recently, the email parsing capabilities of Halo were worst in class, right? Like the other PSAs, ConnectWise, Autotask, actually had a lot of flexibility around, parsing emails, regexing against things like that. That was historically always been a weak spot in Halo up until recently. Now with the email webhook overhaul and all of that stuff, there's actually a lot more power in that system in Halo natively, but you can gain a lot of ground doing AI parsing of emails too. So
100%.
Yeah, like just, is this something, extract out the user, client, company, any of that stuff and parse the email. Alerts. I know that I brought up alerts earlier, but like that's the one thing that like most people are using email parsing for. And before you couldn't really like say, okay, it goes to this client or it's all coming from the same email address. What do you do? It's this really powerful thing you can do with AI that's actually it's really good at if you have a good prompt, right? So.
Yep. I'll show off a little example that we use internally all the time. Let me just generate a fake project to do this from. For me, this is a project. I'm just also going to get
What about AI surveys? Turn it off. Don't use it. It's just the silliest thing in the world. I don't know why that's even a thing.
I love the concept. If we can survey 100% of my tickets on closure using AI, again, with a good prompt and all the right information in there, it's not obviously, we don't want it to be real feedback that our engineers are getting to say, oh, OpenAI thinks you did a good job and we're using 4.0 mini, so it's really thick. But having an understanding of, was the customer happy with this resolution or not? Or did we close the ticket when we should have done? And was the data that we put in good? Again, you can ask all those questions yourself, write them all to your own custom fields and then report on it. And you could start to pick up on, okay, there was 5 tickets closed yesterday where AI, ChatGPT is not sure about these. Now, again, I can go look at it rather than rely on, oh, the AI is just going to decide it for me. Again, thank you detection, right? Is that same example.
Yeah. The AI, I mean, the AI survey thing, in concept could be very good. I think the execution of it is very silly as it exists. And you made a good point. It should be like a sentiment and tonality analysis on incoming emails, which I do with Quantum Ops, and it actually is like super awesome because we know before the ticket gets closed that something's going off the rails. Like, oh, this person is like getting aggravated, or they're mentioning that they've been waiting a long time for support. You have the chance as a service delivery manager to like intervene before that gets off the rails versus let's use AI to survey at the closure of a ticket. But really, it's like not even an AI issue so much as you can get around this by just having a survey in every outbound agent email too, so you can know that those things are going off the rail. But
yeah,
I digress.
So yeah, let me pull up this. So bit of background, we obviously as Halo consultants do a lot of projects with customers, implementing, updating, improving their HaloPSA instances, right? What we typically do with customers is we typically work with customers who have already been using Halo for a bit. They've probably already onboarded. Maybe they onboarded a year ago, maybe more recently or even longer ago. And they've decided they want to get more out of the platform. And so we work with them to really get more out of the platform. And so we typically start with an audit of their Halo. And then the next step is, okay, what do you want to do? And what do we think you should be doing based on our audit, right? What are you clearly missing? You're not billing out of Halo, or your agreements aren't right, or any of that kind of thing. And we smush that together and come up with a kind of project plan. And the first step, or one of the steps in that, is once we've got that broadly outlined project plan, we hit our generate tasks button. And we take all the information that they gave us, we take all the information we got. I've just created a 5 bullet point list of random ones generated from Claude a second ago. But we throw this into the generate tasks box. We put in, oh, this is going to be fun. Let me go and fix that a second. And we basically have a big prompt again off to Claude asking, telling it that we're creating a project plan based on this information that we're about to provide. It's typically a 90-day plan. This is how many hours they have with us per month, and therefore we want to be looking at only doing the first set of tasks and then output all the other tasks that we can't complete, all that kind of stuff. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Let me just. Yeah. Hopefully that works. And what this allows us to do is, instead of then painstakingly sitting there for, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, building that project plan quite literally inside of Halo, it allows us to instead just hit generate project tasks, and it's going to go away, ping off to AI, and then it's going to generate those project tasks.
Oh, no, you're still in my thunder. I was going to demo this for the next question.
Oh, sorry. Let me just do this and that, and save, and that should now not hate me.
1 second. Let me just make sure I find the right one. Don't start leaking customers' details.
What do you mean? You mean it's not all just randomized, right?
Yeah. This is my
Definitely.
live instance. We've got to be
I know.
a
I had
little
him
bit
copy.
careful.
I had him copy my production instance to UAT so I could do this, and then I realized I didn't copy any of the ticket data, and I'm like, oh no.
Right. Let me try that again. This should still not working. Why is this? Maybe I need to do that. I'm just trying to hack around it so that I can actually just log it. I'll tell you what.
Is that loading from an integration method?
It loads from SQL, but it's loading from the customer's agreements. Because I made this against us, we don't have any agreements, so now it's getting really unhappy with me.
Okay, so you didn't steal my thunder then, because I'm going to demo on the next one how to load a custom field from an integration method.
Yeah, nice. So if we now hit generate tasks, that little box is gone, so I don't have to worry about it. Find the tasks that I just had. Here, paste them in, hit save, and wait. Now again, this is actually one scenario where we were starting to run into that 100-second problem because we're trying to get so much information out of Claude's API in this instance. We're also using tool use so that we get it back in JSON format, which is obviously a lot nicer than just getting a text block of text and trying to deserialize it again. But there we go. If we now click on the project tasks, you can see it said we had 1 before. Now I've got 6. I click into there. We've passed through all of the milestones. So whenever we create a project, we always have milestones. Those are typically all the same, depending on whether it's a onboarding or a consultation project. So we pass through those milestones. We also internally have a field called type of work, which is the different type of work that we do for customers. So we pass all of those into the AI as well. And we basically just tell it to make a best guess based on those things. We also give it the time budget and ask it to set that. We hard code some things like the ticket type ID in there. And we throw all that in and it creates our project tasks for us. And again, if we were to provide more information, it would actually give us, there we go. You know, if you provide more information, it will be better and better, right? But here we go. That's created that task. We can then go and close that task out and complete it when we're ready with it. Now, again, this isn't going to be the end of the road for this, right? This isn't, oh, your project plan's created. Great. I just got AI to do the whole thing for me. But what it is an amazing first step where I can either update these, delete them. Maybe I do still need to create some tasks. This is not perfect, but it's got me 50, 80% of the way there versus having to do all of this manually. And now that they added this edit child ticket values button, if I just need to update the time budgets, I can do that super quickly.
What? Is that in beta or is that in prod?
No, this is in prod. Save and they all update.
Oh, that's amazing.
So
Okay,
only certain
huge.
fields, not everything, but time budget, start date, due date, status. If agent was in here, that's another one, summary. There's a few of these fields that you can update this way. And
That's awesome.
yeah, it just gives you a, was it like Monday.com like feel? But yeah.
Yeah. That's huge.
And I'll just
That's-
very quickly show that integration as well on the back end.
That's really cool because as good as project templating is, like, it doesn't solve for everything. And it can be really inflexible in the, you know,
Exactly, right.
in
Lots
the
of
actual
customers
spawning
have
of
those
it. You know?
unique projects, right? You know, one 365 migration is not always the same as the next one, depending on what stuff that customer is using. There's a bunch of scenarios where, okay, there's a bunch of scenarios where a project template is amazing because it saves me all that time, and it does force a process, right? It does force us to do it in the right way at the right time. There are other scenarios where it's a completely ad hoc project. We're never going to repeat this, so it doesn't make sense to go and make a project template. But I've got maybe 50 project tasks I need to go make here, and that's going to take me all day versus I can throw it at AI and get me started. So just to very quickly run through, we have a start step here, which is using the old school method of hitting the report API, but is getting back milestone names and the types of work that we use. So that just returns us a comma separated list of all the milestone names and all the task names. And then we go, hey, Claude, here's a big prompt about what we want you to do. Here's all the stuff that we need, blah, blah, blah. And then off the back of that, we say, okay, we get an array back. From that array, run through and create project tasks. And if there are no project tasks, then fail because we did something wrong. And if it can't create a project task, then kick out and fail. So yeah.
It's huge. I'm going to steal the shit out of that.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Okay, how's the next one here? Is it somehow possible to use PowerShell scripts in the portal front end? An example would be help users search 80 groups. No, but yes. And so I'll demo kind of like a similar concept. So no, you can't call PowerShell from the front end. What you could do, I guess, in a roundabout way, is call an Azure Arc enabled local machine that could run PowerShell and return to you a value via API. The setup of that would be so convoluted and nightmarish that I would recommend you do not do that. But if you are using something like Entra ID Connect to sync those groups up to Entra, you could do it with the Graph API, yes. And the way that you would do it is with a custom field that is loaded with a custom integration method. This is something relatively new. It came out in 184, I think. No, not 184, 174.
74, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Certainly recently.
Yeah. This is one of the most powerful features that a lot of people don't know exists in Halo. I actually have been asking for this for 5 years, and I was so thrilled when it finally made it into the product. This is the bee's knees. So you can normally load a custom field from SQL. You can have static text, but what was missing is the ability to retrieve data from an external API and bring that into the custom field value. So you could do that. And an example here is, our QuantumOps product, a lot of what it's doing is Azure AI search indexing and kind of like doing some research, right? Where it'll use like AI research APIs and it'll use web search and kind of like come up with a whole bunch of stuff that the agent could use to solve that ticket. When we go to close a ticket at TechPulse, we get a custom field that says, select the items that were useful in resolution of this ticket. This is stuff that QuantumOps found on the web, similar tickets, analysis, research. And the reason that we're capturing this is so that we can reinforce the training on the model to make sure that it's going to return useful information in the future, again, for the agent. But this is actually loaded from an API. So you could implement the same kind of thing with the Graph API and search groups and populate a custom field that way, just by using a custom integration method, right? And to call an API. Mine is actually, this is disgusting, Robbie, you're going to like this, but it's actually a post to a webhook, and the response from the webhook post actually gives it the properly permanent data.
Right, if you do have that skill externally, right, to have some kind of external function to do your automation, this is one where at the moment I'm hamstrung again. I keep saying to Halo, let's do a runbook here instead of just a method, because I might need to get authentication in a weird way, or there's a whole bunch of other things where I might need to get additional data before I can do this. I don't want to write that all to the ticket in some way first in order to collect it. And especially with live custom fields as well, right? But if you've got external systems like, Roost, N8N, Azure Automation, you can use those to do a bunch of automation to then return the values that you want in that custom field without having to, well, by just calling it, right? We can just provide what we want and get back everything, that all of the information from the graph, all of the groups from graph. You could make that specific again if you want to run some PowerShell first. But yeah, this is super powerful.
Yep. And so the only caveat here is that it's got to return an array, right? And
Yes.
when this was initially released, it was essentially useless because it again has to return data the same way a custom field lookup from SQL does, right? It has to have an ID and a display name. Getting an ID and a display name from an external API that you don't have control over is impossible. So I think now you can use a GUID, right, for the ID. You couldn't before,
Not
but now you can.
yet, but you can very, very soon. Morgan's promised it. I think it's even hit coming soon. I think it's even hit coming soon now. When that comes, it's that's our first like big step. The next one, which I know is coming, is live custom field data as parameters being sent across as well.
Nice.
So the idea being, for anyone who's following along here, we could be at a point where somebody goes to a ticket form and they select, I want to add or remove a user from a group, right? And then we click on the form, we pop a custom field that says, which group would you like to add somebody to? And they click the custom field, it loads all of the groups for their tenant. They type in the group name. Or let's take remove, sorry. I want to remove Chris from the HaloPSA admins group. I go to the form, I find the HaloPSA admins group. Once I click that custom field of the HaloPSA admin group's ID, ideally, which is going to be a GUID, which is why we're kind of hamstrung and we really want all these additional things. That's always the way with Halo, right? They give us one thing and us consultants are like, yeah, now we need like 4 additional things and then we can use it and then it'll be amazing. And we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing for additional things. But the idea being said, if they fill out a form, I want to remove someone from a group, they select the group, we push that into the next field. Who do you want to remove can actually show me live who's in that group by doing a lookup as soon as they select the group, right? And then they can actually pick who they want to remove. Again, we can store the GUID of the user or users that they want to remove from that group. And then kicking off to our automation, now we can completely automate adding, removing users from groups.
Yep. And they've even actually added, this I think was added in 184, was the ability to get the enter tenant ID and the enter user ID natively here. Because this is stuff that Halo's already storing. So you could pass this to your integration method. This is great. This is only going to get better with time. So, all right, we're up against time here, but there's one more question that I see actually asked a lot in the Discord. So I think that we should probably answer it here, and this could be our closer here. But cool. Emil A said, we might start giving the first 30 minutes free, included in their package on tickets. How can this be done? Ugh, this is a tough one because
pain.
Yeah, you can't. So I think what the consensus is that you have to do it with a different charge rate for the first 30 minutes or something, right? Or you have to runbook it.
Yes. Runbooking it would still involve setting a different charge rate, basically. Yep. So the idea would be when your ticket gets closed, it will run a runbook. That runbook will check what is the total time logged against this ticket. Okay, it was half an hour. Then we'll go and update all the actions on the ticket and mark them with this no charge, probably not actually no charge, but like a secondary, we're not going to charge you first 30 minutes free charge rate that doesn't charge them. It's, certainly not native in the platform. It's not something that Halo does today. I don't know if they'll ever really do it. It does get asked a fair bit, but it's quite niche, to be honest. At the same time, it's
not a typical thing that a lot of MSPs do.
It's definitely possible, but it's going to be you're making something yourself, right? And is triggered on the back of a ticket getting closed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could run it every action if you really wanted to, but yeah, ticket closure is the best way to do it. Evaluate what the time is on the ticket. Take the first action or the first 30 minutes of the first action, apply it to a charge rate that's not going to bill out. Don't use no charge time. Don't abuse no charge time. It's actually the number one mortal sin that I see, MSPs commit in Halo, especially ones that have self-implemented, is they just pick no charge for everything because they think that means it's included in the agreement or whatever. That is not what no charge time is for.
Not what it means.
Yeah. No charge time has very specific connotations in the back end of Halo. It has a very specific and special charge rate. I think really the intention is to use it for system actions and stuff.
Or as an override, right?
Yeah, as an override. No charge time can never become billable unless the charge rate's changed. So there's no way you can catch it in labor review and make no charge time be billable. You can't put it on a billing template. It's no charge. So it's totally fine to have a charge rate that doesn't bill, that's not no charge time. I actually like when I build Halo, 95% of actions, no charge is actually excluded from the drop down the charge rates. Because
and they're adding that to ticket types soon, that restriction.
Nice.
So we can, that was one of our big pain points, is being able to restrict charge rates to like ticket service desk stuff and project stuff, so that we can just have totally separate charge rates for projects rather than having to kind of map in, okay, you're doing remote support on a project, which is just feels weird to a lot of people, and often there's different rates and all sorts. So yeah, that's coming soon. There is also a million things coming soon because it's Halo, and there's always a million things coming soon.
I think what I want to see the most, and I think Quentin is probably with me on this one, is I want to see charge rate restrictions and overrides on billing templates. That would be huge. The ability to like set those on a template and then have that, when you're sending that template to a client, restrict charge rates and set overrides and stuff. That would be a huge quality of life improvement. I had to go through this actually recently because we onboarded a huge client. It's like, I don't know, like 80 or 85 locations, and they all fit into one of these 3 tiers for the on-site support, hourly rate.
Nice.
And so I had to set up 3 contracts, but that each have an override, and then do a billing template that had 90 entries in it in order that say, if it's this, put it against this contract so that the charge rate gets override. That was tough. I wouldn't expect people to be able to figure that out.
We have a customer who has, I think when we looked at the table, it's about 100,000 charge rate overrides, because they have 80 charge rates and every customer's charge rates are unique. And they're a big MSP. And then we got to the end of it and they said, oh yeah, we need to update them next month because we update them every year. This was a project that we were running with Halo, and luckily it was Halo's responsibility, that stuff. And we actually sat the customer down and said, you don't want to do this. And they said, we know we don't, but this is how we do it right now. And if we don't do it, we're going to lose a bunch of money. So we have to do it this way right now. Now, again, we would have a hard stop there, right? And I think you'd probably be the same. We need to come up with a better way of doing this. This cannot be the way, but yeah.
Yeah, charge rate abuse is one of the biggest things, right? Because people come from ConnectWise and they have work type work role, and it's either, we have a quadrillion charge rates or we're using no charge time for everything. And you do not need a quadrillion charge rates. There is better ways to do it. I run 3 separate whole ass different companies in Halo in one instance, and we have 20 charge rates. And I think 8 of those are just project-based stuff. So it's definitely doable, just with some creative billing template design. But
yeah, we have an internal rule at Renada where if you go over 10 charge rates, we have to have a meeting internally between Connor and I to decide whether we're going to allow you to do it or not, because it's stupid at that point, right? Now you've got an excuse. You've got 3 companies and you know what you're doing. That also helps. But people just creating charge rates for no reason, it's going to cause you more headaches than it's going to solve. And there's probably a better way to solve the problem that you're trying to solve than adding a new charge rate in.
If the question is, if you ever question, do I need a charge rate? The answer is almost always no. You need a base set of charge rates, and there's more creative ways to get around needing more charge rates. But
yeah.
Okay. Well, we're at time. Thank you so
I think
much,
so.
Robbie. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. It was awesome. We had really good turnout. I'm sure we'll probably do this again soon.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Yeah.
I think-
Anything closing?
No, I think it's just, Halo's always a moving target, so just keep plugging away. I think it's important. We, as an organization, we have all our customers on monthly retainers because the idea is we push you to keep pushing Halo, right? Keep improving it, but also, especially when it comes to automation, but equally, especially when it comes to Halo, keep it simple and start slow and small. Don't start with, I want to completely automate my new starter process, right? That was the first thing we started today with. Start with, I want to make a form where users can fill out basic information. Then add to that form, okay, wouldn't it be really cool if they could select some stuff specific to the customer? Okay, well, wouldn't it be really cool if we could now create that customer automatically? Or even just have all the information in the right place so we can go do it the right way the first time. And just build on it slowly. Don't go for the Hail Mary straight away because you won't make it and you'll end up with something buggy and broken and you'll be unhappy.
Yeah, or you're going to start harboring resentment against the platform. And like, I actually have a rule, like we won't do new user onboarding automations or anything like until you're actually live on the platform.
Process right. Yeah. You have to have the process right. If you can't do it correctly yourself, we can't do it correctly in an automated fashion. That's right. Another big one for automation. If you want to automate it because you can't do it properly, that's a bad excuse to automate it. You need to know how it's done well and then automate the process.
Exactly. Automation is not a replacement for having a process. Automation is making the process repeatable automatically.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Robbie. And I'll see you on the next one, man. Thanks.
Yeah, if people have got feedback, let us know. Obviously, we've got the LinkedIn, YouTube, everywhere to give us feedback. We'd love to do it again. Maybe even make it a semi-regular, not too regular, but semi-regular thing that we do. And get more people in and ask questions and make it more back and forth, right? Equally, today's been some pre-canned questions. If we can have a bunch of people just asking questions and we can build live and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah, I want to race you on building stuff too. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that sounds good. Brilliant.
All right. Thanks, guys.